right. So welcome to Friday of week 3. This is the day when we start finishing up Tamburlaine, which was our first 2 plays of the semester. Yeah, let me kind of show you what's coming up. Okay, so this Saturday at midnight, you have an analytic response 1 due, where you look at and respond to something we've read. It can be Tamburlaine. If you want to, you can compare Tamburlaine to the Dark Lady Sonnets or Christopher Marlowe's The Passionate Shepherd to His Love. Find something you think is interesting, revealing, significant, confusing, difficult. Okay. And, think about it and kind of start to explore a possible answer to it. Okay. You can focus on the text. You can compare and contrast 2 texts. You can focus on a character. You can focus on a theme. You can focus even on just like an episode. Your analytic response should be typed double-spaced, 2 to 3 pages. If you look at the rubric, you'll see that you should include explained quotes. Make sure the quotes are included, and then you kind of give the quote and then you kind of explain what you think the quote means. Okay. And kind of try to make original insights, try to dig deep into kind of what is the implications of this, what does it show, what might be the author trying to argue, what might the audience have gotten from this, what does it show about the culture, about that particular zeitgeist, stuff like that. Yeah. All right. 2 to 3 pages. If you go over, I'm not gonna be all that mad. Just try not to make it like 6 pages. Don't need an intro or conclusion. You don't need a thesis, but you should have a focus. Okay? Questions? Okay. Maddie, I'll check that during the first activity. Okay. Let me just make sure. Okay. Also, this has been our homepage, but this only takes us up till today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change it. Next class, we're going to be starting Shakespeare. So Tuesday, we're going to read actually about like what racial difference was like in the Renaissance. So this is criticism. It's not Shakespeare yet. It's kind of like how to understand Shakespeare. So this is from the book Shakespeare, Race and Colonialism. Like the intro, I think I gave people the intro to read, or did I give you guys chapter 1? Maybe I gave you both. Look for kind of more communication about this. I think I'm gonna have you read chapter 1, but I gave you both the intro and chapter 1 because I'm gonna pull stuff from the intro to kind of direct your attention to. Okay. If you want, you can revisit the Dark Lady Sonnets. You can also look at this other guy and what he said about Shakespeare and race. No one's presenting this day. And then a week from today, we are going to start reading Titus Andronicus. So this is also a website. So here's the original text. And then if you want, you can do a translation. I did it with Shmoop, but Shmoop has an awful lot of like ads lately, but the thing is Titus Andronicus is not a very well-known play, so I had kind of limited resources to kind of choose from. Okay. Zara will be presenting. Questions? Okay. All right, so let's get going and start talking about the end of Tamburlaine, finishing Marlowe's Tamburlaine. Okay, so yeah. So I guess I didn't even include any like review, but if we were to review what has happened so far before today's reading, what are some of the things we were talking about last class and stuff? What happened in the first half of the second part of Tamburlaine? Remember?
Well, his wife died.
Yes. So Zenocrate died. Um, also in this version, Tamburlaine is Muslim. And the main antagonist, kind of challenging Tamburlaine, is Bahazet's son, Calipine. Also, we see Tamburlaine as a dad, and we see that he's kind of disappointed in his children. He thinks they're too much like Zenocrate. Okay. The other thing we talked about last class is religion. And all the fighting between the Muslims and the Christians. Okay. All right. We finally did Tamburlaine topics. Okay. So at the beginning of today's reading, this is the wrong one. Where is it? We get a new character, a new female character, which makes it the third, Olympia. What is this character like? What is her deal?
I'm sorry, did you ask like what happened with her?
Yeah, what is she like? What happened with her? What's her deal? Yeah.
She tried to kill herself after her husband got captured, and her son was like, no, kill me first. So she did that, and before she could kill herself, she got captured, and she was like due to marry Theridamas or something like that. Is that who it is?
Yes.
And so she just wanted to die like the whole time, and he didn't want to let her do that, obviously. So he got tricked. She was like, I'll give you some ointment that makes you like invulnerable to like blades, and she put it on her neck, and she was like, see, try it. And then he stabbed her and she died.
Yeah. Right. So her husband, she's the wife of the captain of one of the cities that Tamburlaine sacks. And when her husband dies, she actually murders her son. So here's the scene, right? So her husband dies and she gets out this dagger. And she says, like, look, they're just gonna torture you. And she says, like, you should die by thy loving mother's hand, who gently now will lance the ivory throat and quickly rid thee both of pain and life. And the son is like, sure, mom, dispatch me or I'll kill myself. Give me your knife or strike home. These Scythians shall not tyrannize me. Fleet mother, strike that I may meet my father. And she stabs him. Like, so we have like starting like in today's reading, a mother killing her child out of love. Sacred Mohammed, if this be sin, entreat a pardon of the God of heaven and purge my soul before it come to thee. She burns the bodies of her husband and son and then attempts to kill herself. Okay. So she's captured before she kills herself, but she kind of murders her baby for honor and to protect him, right? What does this tell you? How does and then Theridamas comes in, Theridamas, and he's like, oh, well done, this is admirable, what a badass. And he really wants to marry her. Like, what do you think of this character? How does she compare to Zenocrate? How does she compare to Zabina? How does this change how women are portrayed in this play? Does it? What do you think?
Well, I think at first, like, she it shows how how bad Tamburlaine and his army have gotten if this mother is willing to kill her own child to avoid him getting captured. Like, they've really, like, they were never good people per se, but they weren't like this is they've really fallen like from grace. And I think she's almost like how Zenocrate could have turned out, like how that could have turned out for Tamburlaine, because obviously, like, it seems to be a similar situation. They capture her, and Therimedes is trying to like make it the same situation, marry her like just how Tamburlaine did to Zenocrate,
Yes.
and it was like the opposite happened for him.
Yeah. And why do you think the opposite happened? So she says, like, you know, he's like, you're always talking about your husband and your son. You're always trying to die. Like, chill out and just be my queen. And she says, I cannot love to be an empress, right? And so it is kind of like a mirror of Zenocrate, but it works out opposite. Why do you think? Is it because, do you think that it's different for Olympia because she's a mother and because she was already married to her husband and Zenocrate was just betrothed to perhaps some guy she had never met?
I'd say that's definitely a factor, and I also think I think that another factor is it was a big talking point how Tamburlaine was like wooing her with his words and like really talking her up and like treating her nice, making her feel good with how he talked to her. And Therimedes is doing none of that. Like he's just
he's no Tamburlaine, right?
yeah, exactly.
In fact, you know, he woos her by talking about how great Tamburlaine is, which like it's not a great strategy. Not a great, you know, way to kind of make yourself seem awesome by talking about how great your friend is. Like good. So I think one explanation could be because, you know, maybe she is a mother. What could be another kind of interpretation or explanation? Maddie?
I think religion can probably play into this a little bit. She focuses on Muhammad a little bit right before she burns the body of her husband and son, whereas Zenocrate, all she has a religion, it's not very much so pronounced. It could just be that she's a more devout section of that, and she doesn't want to, you know, betray her religion.
It could be, yeah. I had not thought of religion, so that's awesome. Like, and it's true, like she's kind of an obvious Muslim. I was thinking also maybe it has to do with personality as well. So there's lots of reasons. Maybe part of it is because she's already a mother and she can't let go of her kid. Another reason could be because Therimedes is no Tamburlaine. Another reason could be because of religion. But I was also thinking like, if this is a play about kind of like trying to think about what it is to be good, and what is admirable and what is honorable, which I think it is. Olympia comes off as kind of like, she's similar to the other women because she is still kind of married and does still kind of build her identity around her relationship to a man, right? To her husband. So she is still kind of an extension of her husband. But she has a lot of personal agency and stubbornness. If Zenocrate was all about how in Tamburlaine's world, women are forced to be kind of practical and self-preserving, here Olympia kind of kiboshes that, right? Olympia shows a kind of warrior, how you could be a warrior woman in this society. And the way you do that is kind of by doing what's impossible, doing what's really hard, you know, killing your child and then killing yourself, right? I think there's more work that could be done on kind of comparing these three ladies, especially because I think I mentioned this last class that Christopher Marlowe gets a lot of flack for representing pretty flat female characters. And, you know, you can always look at like, does he deserve to get, you know, critiqued for just writing passive female characters? What about Olympia, right? How is this an empowering portrayal of a woman? And how is it yet still kind of patriarchally kind of prescribed? Okay. Yep. We also get the character of Caliphus. Do you remember who Caliphus is? I know it's just like, it sounds just like Bahazet's oldest son. You know, do you remember who he is?
Is that Tamberlane's son?
Yes, Tamberlane's oldest. What do you think of this guy? What happens to him?
I didn't understand. So the brothers are like, let's go fight, and he's like, no, I'm good. And then
Exactly.
said he's like not scared of his dad, even though he should be.
Right, right. And what does he do instead of going to war? Do you know? Do you remember?
He
Doesn't
plays
he stay in the
cards.
tent?
Yeah, he's gambling, right? He's playing cards. So he says, like, this is what he says to his brothers. So it might be helpful to kind of look at his like reasoning for not like wanting to fight and kind of thinking about this and whether we're supposed to take this alternative perspective seriously. So he says, "Away, ye fools! My father needs not me, nor you, in faith, but that you would be thought more childish valorous than manly wise. If half our camp should sit and sleep with me, my father were enough to scare the foe. You do dishonor to his majesty to think our helps will do him any good." What do you think? He's basically like, our dad is so impressive, like he doesn't need us. And in fact, we'd just be insulting him to show up on the battlefield. Do you believe him? Do you believe he really thinks this?
I mean, I think if we were to analyze him as a character, he's probably scared. Probably just doesn't want to go fight.
Yeah.
But we were talking last class about how his Tamberlane's children are all more like Xenocrate, a little bit more on the peaceful side, not the warmongering, I'm gonna kill everyone side. And this kind of showing up feels more like he's making excuses. Making excuses. I'm not saying it's a bad thing.
No, yeah.
saying,
I think
like-
I think you're right that like here, like he's kind of like, yeah, oh, our dad is like a god on earth. And like it Tamberlane says the same things about himself all the time, but like even his brothers are not sold on this logic, right? That we're like, they know that Tamberlane wants them out on the field fighting. It's like almost like Caliphus. I always think of him as like, you could look at him as a coward or scared, and I'm sure that's how he's been portrayed. But I also kind of think of him as kind of like maybe the smartest of all of Tamberlane's kids. Especially because he's kind of like, well, I'm just taking dad at his word. He says he's a god on earth. He says no one can stand against him. Why then does he need me? Right? And so like he's smart enough to kind of use Tamberlane's rhetoric against him, right? So like one of the questions I always kind of think it might be interesting is like, if you were to play Caliphas like on stage, would you play him as a cowardly, scared, kind of effeminate kind of role? Or would you kind of portray him as something different, more rebellious, more sympathetic?
I mean, personally, I'd probably play him as kind of a combination of the two.
Okay, yeah.
Just like more cunning, I guess, and smart rather than necessarily rebellious or scared, but like kind of this in between. It's like the constant comparisons Marlowe puts into Xenocrate. Obviously, he wants us to think about it. It's like try to find an impasse between Tamberlane and Xenocrate being peaceful, but also being like warmongering and smart.
Interesting.
Having a way
And
with words.
Xenocrate is kind of like not necessarily all that passive, but kind of like laid back.
She's the passive. She's the example we look to for a passive
Right.
voice in all of this, because
Practical.
nobody else is really
Thoughtful, right?
passive. Everybody else wants to go to war, so it's like
pacifist maybe instead of passive, right? Yeah. Okay. And then you know, especially because like he says to his brothers, is he sympathetic? He says to his brothers in a few lines later, you know, this is line 24, this is line 32. He says, I know what it is to kill a man. It works remorse of conscience in me. I take no pleasure to be murderous, nor care for blood when wine will quench my thirst. He's like the like almost like the anti-establishment voice in this play. If Tamburlaine is all about wanting more, the consumer of the play, the consumer of lands, the conqueror, Caliphus is kind of like, he seems like he could potentially at one point be like the moral conscience, right? Like, I don't really like killing. Like, it doesn't make me feel good. Like, I don't buy into this martial warrior mentality where the more people you kill and the tougher you are, the more of a man you are. So he represents like an anti, hyper masculine thread potentially. But you can also portray him as lazy and just kind of cowardly and unsympathetic, using whatever kind of arguments that he can figure out to get out of fighting. So he says to his brothers, they say, you're not going to get honor in the fields, but he says, like, take you the honor. I will take my ease. My wisdom shall excuse my cowardice. I go into the field before I need. So basically he's like, I don't really care about outward shows of honor. I think I'm a pretty good person. I think I'm smarter than all of you. And so I'm not gonna go fight. And then he says, these bullets fly at random where they list. And should I go and kill 1,000 men, I were as soon rewarded with a shot. So here's kind of maybe the evidence for that he is, for all of his like rhetoric, that he's like, he doesn't like killing, or that he doesn't need to kill, or he doesn't buy into the warrior mentality. Here's kind of evidence that maybe he's just kind of a coward, right? Or you can read it as he sees the pointlessness of war. I could kill 1,000 men and get killed, and I would just be another one of that number. And sooner far than he that never fights. Should I go and do nor harm nor good, I might have harm, which all the good I have, joined with my father's crown, would never cure. I'll to cards. Okay, so he's like, nothing in the he wants to take this a step too far, and he's like, nothing in this life means anything. Might as well just play cards. But then he's like, I'd really prefer to go to war with naked ladies in nets of gold, which makes him seem less appealing. Okay, what happens to Caliphus?
Doesn't he die?
Yes, he does die.
Tamburlaine kills him.
Tamburlaine stabs him.
Okay.
Tamburlaine basically says, like, you shame me. This is Tamburlaine, at his Sopranos best, right? You shame me. You've brought dishonor on the family. And then he stabs him. Do you think Caliphus saw that coming?
I think definitely not. I think he had this whole attitude that he felt he was untouchable, like throughout the play, because he thought he for the most part he is the smartest person in the room, but like in that particular moment it ends up coming back to bite him.
Just because you're the smartest doesn't mean
doesn't mean you're
being
immune
smart
to a
in this
sword.
world is not going to help you, right? Being tough in this world is going to help you. Sorry, keep going.
Well, I was just gonna say, because I feel like he was acknowledging the fact that he maybe like he considers war like to be like fighting in war to be less about skill and more about luck. So he's like calling out, I think, that line about like the bullets fly at random. I think he's saying I think he's saying his dad just got more so lucky than he's really just a great fighter.
Yeah. Yes. And he's not going to chance that, because he
exactly.
he knows the chances, right? I kept thinking statistics. He doesn't know the statistics, but he knows the chances, right? He's got a better chance in cards than not. But the fact that he doesn't leave Tamberlane's camp, the fact that he just kind of hangs out playing and wants to talk about women, these are kind of evidence that he's also kind of spoiled, and so he doesn't see it coming when Tamberlane kind of murders him. And maybe other people didn't see it coming either, right? Did you see it coming? Did you think? Brett says yes. Maddie
A
says
little bit. I think we all probably got the feeling that it wasn't going to end well
for Caiaphas,
for him. Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard for me to remember the first time I read it, but I especially because we have Olympia killing her kid in the previous scene. It seems like I remember part one of Tamberlane was all kind of Marlowe writing based on history. Part two, all of his invention. This is all him. There is no history of part two. All of Timur the Lame's history ended with part one. And so, this is his chance to kind of ramp up the crazy, spectacular, over the top cruelty that he kind of did in part one. So I saw it coming. But you can see how maybe others might not have. Okay, so discussion 5.1. I thought it'd be fun to kind of take a few minutes, 5-6 minutes, to compare Olympia killing her son with Tamberlane killing his son. What's similar? What's different? What do you think this means, or what does this show about family love, mother's love versus father's love, mercy, pride? So just kind of take till 12:56, 12:57, and kind of sketch out some ideas looking at these two things. And I did put the page numbers, page 52 versus page 65, so you could look at the stuff. And I'm going to stop sharing so you have your whole screen to work with. I'll be here for questions. take like another minute. Okay, good. You guys, you posted some really awesome stuff here. Blah, 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 blah. What? So it made me, it raises a good question because like, so you guys talked a lot about like Tamburlaine kills his son because of, what'd you guys say?
I said
Maybe-
narcissism and
Narcissism,
anger.
pride, anger, because he sees his son as an extension of himself and he's embarrassed, right? So like for all like the trappings of, and I think Maddie, you might have said hypermasculinity, like all of the trappings of hypermasculinity, right? That like he says it's for honor, but what does honor look like here, right? And then Olympia kills her son out of love and protection, and that does seem to be like honor for her, right? And so you have two kind of competing definitions of honor here. In the parents kill their children out of duty and honor. And you could kind of say that they're gendered, but I think it's almost more interesting to say like, to look at like, maybe Marlowe's trying to think about like, kind of trying to put like pressure on the idea, and maybe he's not even trying to, but I feel like this does sort of put pressure on the idea of, honor, of Tamburlaine's idea of honor, Tamburlaine's definition of honor. Because like, especially because Tamburlaine has like a lot of increasing levels of cruelty in today's play. What are some of the crazy things that he does, crazy cruel things he does in today's reading?
Didn't he hang that king up, or
The
I forget who
governor.
it was, but yeah,
Governor.
he hung him up, and the governor, yeah, and had him shot.
Yes. So he hung him up and he had him shot. And we see this actually performed on stage. And a lot of times in Shakespeare's day, a lot of the violence is performed off stage just because, for purely practical reasons. They can't have, they don't do as many fountains of blood back then. But here we see this guy up on stage being killed. And so there's one example of his cruelty. What else?
Well, I mean, there's the obvious. He murders his son.
The murder of the son, right? Yes, good. Excellent. Other stuff?
He also makes I think it was the other kings pull his chariot, like
Yeah.
horses.
Right. So Bajazet was caged and he brought him out every once in a while for a footstool and kind of used him as entertainment, as feast. These other kings, he's like putting in actual harnesses and making them actually pull him, right? So here we got Tamburlaine's increasing cruelty. This is the one that like I put first. I think I don't know why, but anyway, I think it happened like chronologically first. The captured kings are used like horses and made to pull his chariot. He even says so, like, as for you viceroys, you shall have bits. So he's talking about bits in their mouths. Harnessed like my horses draw my coach. And when you stay, be lashed with whips of wire. I'll have you learn to feed on provender and in a stable lie upon planks. So like, this is almost like worse than what happened to Bajazet, right? Because it's like dehumanizing and also like physical, more physical torture than Bajazet had to go. Bajazet's torture was all kind of status related humiliation. This is humiliation and also now physical torture, I would say, I would argue. And like his captains are becoming more and more cruel as well. When the guys like are pulling Tamburlaine's chariot, they start cursing him, and Theridamas is like, they really need bits in their mouths. Like, you're letting them to be too human by talking. You know, you really need to silence them to really complete their dehumanization, right? So here we have Enter Tamburlaine, drawn in his chariot by the kings of Trebizond and Soria with bits in their mouths. In his right hand, he has a whip, which he scourges them, while in his left hand, he holds the reins. And then he says, like, not only that, but he says to them, like, to make you fierce and fit my appetite, like to make you fierce war horses, I'm going to feed you with flesh as raw as blood. And there's the suggestion that it might be human flesh. Just from the notes, and drink impales the strongest muscadel. So this is like wine. If you can live with it, then live and draw my chariot swifter than the wrecking clouds. If not, then die like beasts and fit for naught be perches for the black and fatal ravens. So he's not even going to bury them, right? What do you think this looked like on stage? Do you think it was comical or cruel? Are we supposed to be horrified, or are we supposed to kind of be titillated?
I kind of say both in a way.
Which is kind of reminds me a little bit of Tarantino, right? Talk about fountains of blood, right? Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, right? Like it's almost like comic horror. What else? Others agree, disagree? Okay. Yeah. This bit at least is kind of like, you know, it seems like kind of typical Tamburlaine maybe, but then he takes it steps even farther, right? So how do you think the audience is supposed to act? What is spectacle like for this play and in this play? I'm going to skip that question for now. He then gives the king's women to be raped and used by lowborn and rough soldiers. So he basically gives a bunch of concubines who are like protected women of a higher class, educated, and stuff like that, you know, who are like form a community of women and usually only have access to one man. He kind of gives them as spoils of war to his soldiers. And Orcanes says, injurious tyrant, wilt thou so defame the hateful fortunes of thy victory to exercise upon such guiltless dames the violence of thy common soldier's lust. And like Tamburlaine doesn't even acknowledge it. Live content then, ye slaves, and meet not me with troops of harlots at your slothful heels. So like basically, there's this. Kills the governor of Babylon, as Jack mentioned, but then he also drowns all the people of the city, right? Like, so he takes all the people and he ties them up and then he throws them in a lake. And Tekelius says, what should be done with their wives and children? Drown them all, man, woman, and child. Leave not a Babylonian in the town. Still kind of comical cruelty, or is this kind of more stepping over the line?
At this point, I think like the audience is definitely supposed to feel like pretty disturbed at what's going on.
Yeah, women and children too, especially like they come back and there's a description of like the whole town being drowned, and they're like, yeah, there's like practically no water left in the lake. It's just like glutted with bodies, drowned bodies. And it's not even like they killed them quick and then threw them in the lake. Like they threw them all in the lake to drown, right? Which seems quite cruel. Is Tamburlaine's increasing cruelty caused by the murder of his and Xenocrate's son, or is the murder just a symptom of increasing cruelty, do you think? So do you think like killing his son was a turning point, and after that, like he's kind of like, well, might as well just go full out? Or is it more like he was going full out and the kid was just kind of the first step?
I think it's like the logical conclusion to the path that he set himself on, like way back in part 1.
Okay.
Like when he started doing anything more, like even when he started like his first battle, like it's the logical conclusion to the path that he set himself on. So I think, and it didn't help that he lost his like moral center in
Was more-
Xenocrate,
yeah.
but like I think it was the logical conclusion.
This kind of like it's part of like my question. Oh, did I not put this question there? Okay, well, part of like the question is like so a lot of scholars have read women in this play as the civilizing force, as the moral centers, but also the civilizing force. And when women die, men kind of lose all reins on their impulses, and kind of those impulses are extremely cruel and horrifically, spectacularly violent. And you can sort of see kind of a little bit of one other kind of episode or evidence for this is kind of Theridamas's change when he sees Olympia. So at the beginning of today's reading, actually at the end of the last class's reading, Theridamas had been like the one commander of Tamburlaine's who had kind of been preaching mercy. Theridamas is kind of my favorite character. He's the one that kind of is like, initially he's Persian and he goes to Tamburlaine, and Tamburlaine kind of talks him into being a buddy. Tekles and Usum Kesne, I don't really find to have that much character, and Theridamas I feel like has a little bit more character. Basically, this is at the end of last class's reading, around pages 52 or something, but like Tamburlaine's all gung-ho to kind of destroy this city, and Tekles and Theridamas, and remember at this point Xenocrate's dead, and they're not kind of doing their normal thing, which is the 3 days. The first day they're in white and you can surrender. The second day they're in red, and if the country surrenders, then they'll kill all the men but leave the women and children, and on the third day they're in black. So this, they haven't even done that yet, and Tekles is like, oh yeah, let's take out this town. Soldiers, yes, my lord. Let's about it. And Theridamas is like, wait a minute, like summon a parley drum. It may be that they will yield it quietly, knowing 2 kings, the friends to Tamburlaine, stand at the walls with a mighty power. So up until this point, Theridamas has been kind of the most moral of Tamburlaine's men, the least impulsive, the least cruel. But then he starts participating more and more in Tamburlaine's cruelty. He falls for Olympia when he sees that she's killed her kid. He says like, this was done just like a soldier's wife. Like he doesn't see it as that she kind of did something really hard. He doesn't see her as an individual. He basically says like, oh, she would make a really good soldier's wife. Like, she's badass like I am. She'd be a very good prize. And then late in today's reading, if she won't submit to him, he threatens to rape her. And so he says like, Lady, then, if nothing will prevail, I'll use some other means to make you yield, such as the sudden fury of my love. I must and will be pleased, and you shall yield. Come to the tent. And this is right before she tricks him into killing her. So Theridamas seems to have undergone a shift here again. I thought he was smart enough to not be taken in by Olympia trick, because like Olympia's trick seems pretty ridiculous, right? Like, I have this magic potion. It makes you invulnerable to harm. And he's like, if really, like, why didn't you use it on your husband? And she's like, well, I didn't really have a chance, but here, I'll prove to you it works. Here, I'm just gonna, put it on my neck. Now try. And I bet you can't kill me. And then of course he kills her, right? I thought he was smarter than this. What did you think? Is this supposed to be comedic or ridiculous or?
I mean, personally, it kind of just made me stop and be like, what? Like,
What is happening here?
'cause,
Marlo.
like, it feels like anyone would be smart enough to realize
Especially because
what was going on.
you're always talking about your dead husband, you're always talking about your dead kid and how you want to join them. But yeah, let me try stabbing you, right?
Yeah, so I agree. Like, who am I to like criticize like, Marlo? But like, this was the only time in the play where I like questioned the writing. Like,
Right.
I was like, this could probably like have been done better. But like, who am I to question this guy? But like, this was the only time in the play where I was like,
What's
what?
happening here? So you could say it as like, you could be like, this is just bad writing. This is, he should have, revise this one or two more times. Or you could kind of, if you wanted to, you could kind of look at it and be like, okay, Theridamas is so caught up in this warrior kind of society, hyper masculine thinking that he's really losing himself. And maybe like he sort of knows Olympia. He sort of knows Olympia's lying to him, right? But like, she's offering him a way out, kind of like to kill her, to kind of preserve his honor. Does this make sense? That like he goes in and she sees that she's killed her son and burned her son and her husband's body, and he's like, well, this is like a brave soldier. He admires her. Maybe Theridamas, depending on how he's played in a drama, in a production, maybe Theridamas like couldn't like let her kill herself here because there were other men around. Maybe here he's like, he's growing impatient because he knows like if he doesn't wrap this up, someone else is going to kind of see him as a weak man and like, not fit to be Tamburlaine's kind of right-hand man. And like, maybe she gives him an out, like, and he was like, yo, I was tricked. Like, you could read it as that. If you want to read Theridamas as kind of a more moral guy, you could definitely also read it as bad writing. So again, like, are women supposed to be the civilizing force or convince men to practice mercy in this play? It's a big question. All right. We also have figures of authority in this play. What do you think of this governor? The governor of Babylon, which is like the last kind of city that Tamburlaine destroys. Do you remember this guy? Like all of his people are like, please surrender. We're all gonna die. Like Tamburlaine is not known for his mercy. Please surrender, right? And this guy responds by saying, so here Max is saying like there's no hope, so why don't you like satisfy the people's general prayers? Maybe Tamburlaine's intolerable wrath could be suppressed by our submission. Maybe if we surrender, we'll at least like get killed quick and mercifully. Really, we should surrender. There's no hope. And this guy refuses, supposedly for honor, right? Villain, respect thou more thy slavish life than honor of thy country or thy name. So here, like, he's like, basically like, you are dishonorable, you are cowardly. More of the themes that kind of we saw with Caliphus. villains, cowards, traitors to our state, fall to the earth and pierce the pit of hell, that legions of tormenting spirits may vex your slavish bosoms and with continual plains. I care not, nor the town will ever yield, as long as any life is in my breast. So he is kind of demonstrating martial honor. Theridamas even offers him a merciful surrender, even though they're on the day of black tents. Theridamas is like, look, you know, I'll let you out of this. He just really wants Babylon. You know, there's a chance that, you know, he won't kill everyone. Which, you know, given Tamburlaine, it's hard to believe that that would happen, but you know, it's worth a try. But again, the governor refuses, insults everyone. And then he tries to save his own life. So he says, no, I'm super courageous. And Tamburlaine's like, well, go draw him up and hang him in chains on the city walls and let my soldiers shoot the slave to death. And the governor is like, oh no, you can't scare me. And then Tamburlaine's, well, up with him. And then the government's like, oh, wait. There lies more gold than Babylon's worth. I hid it in this lake. Save but my life and I will give it to thee. So here, the governor kind of proves that he's kind of actually pretty selfish, right? Again, like Tamburlaine, that honor is kind of, I would say that this is another episode that kind of proves that this kind of honor, or indicates, maybe not proves, but indicates that this kind of honor is like super destructive and useless and ultimately self-serving, and that people are totally willing to sacrifice everyone else's lives as long as their own kind of image is preserved, Okay. Then Tamburlaine burns the Quran. Do you guys know what the Quran is?
The Muslim holy book.
Yes, good, Crystal. And the Muslim holy book, or the Quran, it includes the Torah. The Torah is the Jewish holy book. Christians call this the Old Testament. And it includes the Bible with all of Jesus's stuff, the New Testament. And then it's like the Quran is like those two, as well as the teachings of Muhammad, which is the Islamic holy book. And so one of my professors in grad school really saw this episode as kind of like super ballsy on Marlowe's part, and a lot of people saw it as more evidence of his kind of atheism, because by burning the Quran, you are actually also sort of incidentally burning the Bible. You know, he didn't just take out the teachings of Muhammad. The Quran includes them all, right? And so so this is kind of a big deal. Tamburlaine says, let there be a fire. Presently they light a fire. And he says, in vain I see men worship Muhammad. My sword has set millions of Turks to hell, slew all his priests, his kingdoms, and his friends, and yet I live untouched by Muhammad. So basically he's kind of like, Muhammad is a weakling, and if there really is a God, maybe he should, like, Tamburlaine is here challenging God, right? He does seem to get sick right after this. So he burns the book, in the late 200s. And then by 314, he's like, oh, I feel myself distempered suddenly. Something, I know not what. Whatever it be, sickness or death can never conquer me. What do you think?
I mean, it's kind of foreshadowing. Just
Mm-hmm.
a little bit.
Yeah. Do you think he's being punished by the gods? Are the gods striking him down? It's like the Christian gods striking him down for maybe burning the Bible, being too proud, too cocky, too arrogant. I mean, at least for initially, it seems so, right? Given like it happens like immediately. But then what happens? Do you think his hubris is finally catching up to him? You could read it as that, except then Callapine, Bahazet's son, shows up one last time to challenge Tamburlaine. What is Callipin's plan? He says like, you know, he's like, look, Tamburlaine's resting. He's with all his army's lives, which being faint and weary with the siege, we may lie ready to encounter him before his host be full from Babylon. So revenge our latest grievous loss, if God or Mohammed send my aid. So like, he's basically like, Callipin is like, this is our time to strike. They're all kind of tired. They're all worn out. They're all kind of exhausted from fighting. Tamburlaine's sick. Like Callipin doesn't know this, but the audience knows this. Tamburlaine's sick. And so like, I, at least as one audience member, is all set up for Callipin, who remember is like the up and coming new Tamburlaine, who has like, you know, the rhetoric and like the birthright to take down Tamburlaine. Do you guys agree? Is this what you were expecting?
More or less. I mean, I think I personally expected it to end in a very similar way. It was like somebody, not necessarily Callipine, but someone of a similar stature usurps him, and it kind of it's sort of like a passing of the torch, sort of.
Yes, live by the sword, die by the sword, you know, stuff like that. Yes. So I expected Callipin to take him down. Tamburlaine is sick, probably dying, but even though he's sick, probably dying, and he just got done fighting a ridiculous, you know, sacking a city, he says that like, see my physicians, how Jove has sent a present medicine to cure my pain. He's like, oh yes, another battle. Like this is the best medicine there is. So he's like, yay, Callipin came. And then he defeats them. So I expected Callipin to take Tamburlaine down. Nope. Tamburlaine, sick and on his deathbed and exhausted from a previous fight, takes him out no problem. So thus are the villain cowards fled for fear. There's no heir to Tamburlaine. He doesn't die in battle, right? At the end, he's kind of thinking that, you know, he's kind of disappointed that he's dying, of course. What daring God torments my body thus, seeks to conquer mighty Tamburlaine. Shall sickness prove me now to be a man that have been termed the terror of the world? Like, he's kind of like, I really still have to deal with this stupid humanity. Like, I was like on the level of gods. So Tamburlaine brings out a map in the very last couple of scenes, and he looks at what he's accomplished in life and how much he's conquered, but he actually is not satisfied. He can only see what still remains. And he wants his kids to do it for him. Look here, my boys, see what a world of ground lies westward from the midst of Cancer's line unto the rising of the earthly globe, where the sun, declining from our sight, begins the day with our antipodes. And shall I die and this unconquered? He repeats it twice, like, I can't believe my job is not yet finished. He really wants the whole world. And everyone's super upset and lost without him. What do you think of this ending? Is Tamburlaine ultimately punished? Did he get his comeuppance? What are we supposed to think of this? Take how about 4 or 5 minutes and write about this ending in discussion 5.2. How are we as an audience supposed to feel with the death of Tamburlaine? How do you feel with the death of Tamburlaine? Given that no one ever takes him down in battle, that he just kind of like got old and sick and died. Not even a wound, right? He just kind of like randomly gets sick and dies. Is it the gods punishing him for burning the Bible, or is Marla just kind of like the fact that Callipin couldn't take him down even after praying to Muhammad? Does that kind of put the kibosh on this whole idea of like the gods are punishing him? Yeah. Crystal, good post, I think. Yeah. Yes, Maddie, yes. So Crystal wrote, I feel like we are supposed to be angry that he was never truly held accountable. Despite how truly evil he is, he won. He defeated everything he set out to defeat except death, which is still an escape from punishment from his wrongdoings. And Maddie says it honestly felt a bit climactic, almost boring. There's no pain or torment that he goes to. As an audience, we feel like there should be something more. He went through and he caused all this cruelty. And also like, never punished. Yes, solely, yes, more epic. Yes. So, good and pretty. Okay, so I'm always kind of like thrown by the ending for the exact same reasons that you guys said. Like, he was kind of a horrible person. Shouldn't he get punished? And that always kind of brings me to kind of thinking about like, okay, what is Marlowe kind of, why did the English people love these plays so much, given that Tamburlaine never gets punished? Like, why were they so popular? And especially considering like Tamburlaine is not, English and he's not good and he's just a conqueror. Like, does this mean that England just loves a winner? Loves a savage? Is this, maybe kind of setting England up to kind of be empiricists? So here's some remaining themes and questions, and people have read it that way, and you can definitely read it that way. But even if you do read it that way, that like they admire Tamburlaine, I think it's kind of interesting that they admire him despite the fact that he was sort of like non-Christian, non-English, non-European, even super foreign, kind of brutal. They still kind of admire him and love him, and they're fine with him not being punished. So remaining themes and questions: what are gender roles like? You can compare the three women. What are some of the challenges of being a woman in Tamburlaine's world? We kind of talked a bit about that. Are women seen as a civilizing force? You could also look at what is the role of family in this play? What is the duty that one owes to his or her family? Compare and contrast Tamburlaine and Olympia. You could also look at Bajazet and Zabina's relationship versus Tamburlaine and Xenocrate's relationship. You could look at like, what does this play show about early modern or Renaissance ideas of otherness? Are the English accepting of otherness? What kinds of otherness? Religious, racial, gender? Or does it all come down to power and military? Does this imply that England had colonial or imperial ambitions at this time? Or is it more that they want to make a strategic political alliance? Remember, at this time, Elizabeth was meeting with the Sultan of Turkey. So, maybe they were just kind of really interested in kind of like making good with the Turks. What is the play saying about religion, Christians, especially Catholics and Muslims? Does Tamburlaine represent the triumphs of secularism or atheism, or a third term or option beyond Muslim and Catholic? What does this have to do with imperialism and expansionism, especially because like the English, like many of the colonists of the time, kind of used religion and the fact that people didn't have Christianity as an excuse to kind of go out and conquer everything and either kill off or convert the natives. And then, like, I know we're out of time. So basically, if you want to write about what you're going to write about for your analytic response in discussion 5.3, you can, and I'll try to get you feedback on it tonight. But if you don't get to this, since we're out of time, I'll just count the other two discussions as worth 3 points between the two of them, okay? So analytic response due Saturday, midnight. If it comes in on Sunday morning, I'm okay with that. A soft deadline of midnight. Next class, we're reading about Shakespeare and race. and race in the Renaissance. And any other questions for me? Thanks for a really fun discussion of Tamburlaine today. I enjoyed it. Yeah, have a great weekend. And I will see you on Tuesday and hopefully no more snow. No
Thank
more
you.
snow. Bye, Jack.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
Professor, do you mind if you hang back for just 1 minute? I have to
Oh.
talk to you about something privately.
Sure.
Professor, could I also ask you a question real quick before?